Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
Hello, and welcome to Comic Book Yeti's Cryptid Creator Corner. I'm one of your hosts, Jimmy Gasparo, and I am very excited for today's episode. This is a guest, an artist, but also now a writer that I have long admired. I was lucky enough to meet once at Baltimore Comic-Con and get a print of something that was from one of my favorite, actually my favorite episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. But she has a new comic out from Dark Horse that she is writing and doing the art. Clayton Cowles is lettering. It's called Living Hell. Issue 1 came out in November. I think issue 2 comes out January 8th. I can't wait to talk all about it. Please welcome to the podcast, Caitlin Yarsky. Caitlin, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm running on kind of little sleep, but otherwise good.
Okay.
Still working on Living Hell, so it's a bit of a mad dash to the finish.
Oh, I cannot imagine. But yeah, I think I first became familiar with your work with Coyotes that you did with Sean Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that the next big thing for me was Bliss. I fell in love with that story, fell in love with your artwork on it. Just thought it was tremendous. Loved what you did in the Black Hammer universe as well.
Wow, thank you so much.
But yeah, I think you were at Baltimore Comic-Con maybe 2 years ago or so.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I've mentioned it on this podcast before because it came up in the episode of the podcast that came out today as we're recording this with Christopher Cantwell, because we talked a little bit about Star Trek, and I said, and I think both of our favorite episode was The Inner Light, and I think I picked up a print that you had done of Picard with the flute from that episode, and Chris said, when I mentioned your name, he said, perfect artist to put that together.
That's nice. I'd say it's a great series. I think Next Generation is definitely my favorite of all the Star Treks, and that's my favorite episode too. So yeah, it's a lot of people's favorite. It's just a great, complete story from beginning to end, and adds to his canon and into his characters so well. It's just
and just a great encapsulation of what I think the best of Star Trek and that type of storytelling can be.
Yeah. And he got to have his family. He was never a family dude, and he got to have his own experience.
Exactly. And it gets, and you can get into very Star Trekian type of, it wasn't real, but it was real to him, and what is real, and you can really go off on a tangent. But your new series from Dark Horse, Living Hell, Clayton Cowles is lettering. You're writing it. You're doing the artwork for it, and I read issue 1, and this is one of I've mentioned it before on the podcast. Listeners, who regularly listen will understand that one of my favorite, I don't even know if it's a genre, but subgenre, one of my favorite things is to kind of mix supernatural elements with some sort of whether or not mundanity or bureaucracy. It doesn't have to be supernatural. It can also be science fiction, like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The fact that there's so much red tape in certain things with these fantastical stuff.
Yep.
Exactly. But Supernatural, the television show where death kind of kept records and a book and everything, and there were certain rules to it, or even elements of Beetlejuice, where you go to the afterlife and you gotta take a number and wait. So you've set up this world now to tell listeners who might not be familiar with it, with Living Hell. Essentially, your main character is a demon that has escaped from hell, and he's just kind of living a life. He's tending bar. He has a wife. He has a kid. We see their relationship and a lot of typical family stuff. There are some things that are heightened, but he, in the beginning when we kind of see this world set up, he's just kind of like a guy doing a
Yeah.
thing, and that instantly drew me in. Not just your artwork, but that whole setting, like the idea of this guy who's a demon now human, and he's just kind of tending bar, just trying to get by. Um, it- could you just set it up, a little better than I can for listeners in terms of what Living Hell is all about, and kind of, you know, what led you down this direction?
Sure. I mean, you got it. You got it pretty good there. It's basically this guy who's, he was a god in like ancient Egyptian times, and he's part of this sort of community, I guess, of like just deities and spirits and kind of anything supernatural that at some point in history they were all relegated to hell and they were kind of imprisoned there. So occasionally, some of these demons, well, they're like reclassified as demons, right? And they're literally demonized, and they occasionally like leave hell, like escape from hell and find their way into back to Earth, and they kind of they live sort of Men in Black style, like just among people trying to get by and living like humans. And so he's kind of like I took some aspects of the god that I was influenced by, Set, who's this Egyptian god, and which he's in some instances he's described as sort of a trickster. So I kind of took that and went with it as like he kind of jokes a lot and doesn't really take things seriously, and he can't really hold a job down, and like, he's just kind of goofy. And he's kind of finally like he's kind of happy. He's settled with his life. I think he's kind of got some strife with his wife, but he loves being a dad. And um, yeah, and so everything kind of changes when Hell catches up to him and finds him. And they have these bounty hunters called shepherds. And one of the shepherds finds him, and they have a fight. And then he basically, by transitive properties, I guess he kills that shepherd in self-defense and becomes the next shepherd. And that's a big trope in fantasy and things like that, right? There's one with like Piers Anthony where death death is killed by this guy and he becomes the next death. So it's like
Yeah,
it's definitely
sure.
like a trope. But I thought it would be a really fun one to play with. And so he's the next shepherd, and he has to kind of hunt down his own friends, basically. So the next few issues are all about him grappling with the ethical issues around that, and not wanting to do it, but he's kind of, you know, between a rock and a hard place because they threatened his daughter, and it's hell, and what are you gonna do, right? So he's kind of just
Yeah.
like this anti-hero. And um yeah, so that's kind of how, I mean, it was one of the few ideas that I pitched to Dark Horse. And um I I kind of brought a lot of stuff from my own childhood into the family dynamic stuff, like not necessarily the conspiracy theory stuff with the mom, but like, between like, me and my dad are really close. And so we've just always had a goofy relationship, and we've always, like, me and my siblings and my dad and stepmom have always been really jokey with each other, giving each other a hard time. And so I thought that would be like a really fun element to bring in and kind of get you to like the characters and get close to the characters and kind of care what happens to them. So that was kind of the idea behind that.
Yeah, and I mean, I really thought it worked so well because, yeah, his wife has is a bit of a conspiracy theorist, and
Mhm.
he doesn't take that very seriously, which seems to cause strife between them. But it, it's the his wife, although also is also dealing with, like, feeling a bit like ostracized from the family because, like, the daughter does a video project, and it's a lot of pictures of, like, her and dad having a good time.
Mhm.
And that type of, like, relatable, like, grounded dynamic, like, really makes the more supernatural elements, like, stand out and
Mm.
sing, which I, like, really appreciated. And again, it also ties into that he was a god, and he escaped from hell, and it's like he has power, but, he's still getting in trouble for, just kind of like joking around and didn't pick up the laundry, and he's got to deal with his mother-in-law. And he's trying to, to manage all of these things. Yeah, I just thought I had such a good time. It was just the type of thing that's like just right, like in my wheelhouse of the stuff I like. Um, I thought it was great, and I love your artwork, which just helps. You have a very unique style. Like, I feel like when I see like one of the Black Hammer issues that you've done, like I can just tell, because for listeners who don't know, with like Black Hammer, a lot of the different series are different artists that Jeff Lemire's worked with. But when I see some of the stuff that you've done, I can just like tell. Like Bliss, I feel is so distinctive in terms of your art for that. And I just really enjoyed, seeing it again. And working with a letterer like Clayton Cowles, I don't know if it's done in the art or the lettering, but one of the things in particular when they're going through the daughter's video project and the dad and daughter are laughing and there's ha-has all over the page, and the mom just kind of there's a panel of mom making a hand gesture during it, and one of the ha's like flinging off.
She's like flicking it away from her.
It's so good. It's like one of those things where I'm like, I don't know that I've actually seen that before, a character interacting with the sound effect lettering in such a way to kind of convey mood more so than like anything else, and like an emotion. I thought that was fantastic.
Thanks.
People are going to steal that because I don't know that I've seen that.
I hope they do.
But...
I hope they do. I hope there's like a little bit more kind of like fourth wall breakage with lettering, because I feel like we've done that in movies. I feel like they do that in film sometimes, but they don't quite do that in like, I don't know if you remember the movie Stranger Than Fiction.
Yeah, Will Ferrell movie, right?
Yeah, and Maggie Gyllenhaal, and it's kind of one of those under the radar movies that I thought was really good. But the whole beginning like opening scene was like kinetic typography with like all the letters were interacting with the environment. And I just thought that was really cool. So yeah, the ha-ha-has were like also part of another, family thing. Like my dad has this booming laugh, and it's like, it feels like there are giant ha's in the room with you that you like can't get rid of. So I thought that was kind of the inspiration for that. But yeah.
I thought it was great.
And Jo has the same ha ha ha. Like she has the same style of laughter throughout the rest of the series. Yeah.
Oh, I mean that's perfect. I mean Clayton, the lettering throughout is wonderful. One of the things I was wondering in terms of, the going from the idea to actually like planning out the issues, like what was your, I guess, background or research in terms of, I always kind of have an interest in, different mythologies or different gods, or, even there's things out there now, especially with I mentioned Supernatural before, but all the different demons, how do you kind of get into that for like, I guess, just to name characters, just to kind of figure out who it is like, what pantheon you want to take from in order to use? Is that something you had an interest in, or were you like, oh, demons, and then, okay, how am I going to flesh this out with other characters that might, was there things you created whole cloth, or did you rely on certain things that you researched?
Oh yeah, they were all definitely things that are from like folklore and mythology around the world. So I definitely did research for those. Like issue 2 is going to focus on these Japanese like corpse eating demons called the Jikininki, which is the best name ever. But
yeah, that's great.
They're but what's really fun is like you figure out like what creatures or demons are interesting to you, and then you go, okay, now how would that translate to like a regular world? If they were going to hide among people, what would they do that would kind of relate to what they used to do? And so like, for example, in issue 2, that there are these two little Japanese ladies, old ladies, that are sisters that own a crematorium, and instead of actually cremating the bodies that they get, they just eat them. That's how they like So like they just sit on their porch and like look at people and like kind of people watch and like imagine how they would taste when they died. Um, so it was just really fun coming up with that. Like that's my favorite. I love stuff like that. I think things like Buffy and The Sandman were big influences for me for this kind of story because it brings in like horror but also humor and bringing that supernatural, like you said, into like the mundane world and um so yeah, so it was really fun to find those demons that I thought were interesting and then kind of turn them into like their counterparts hiding among people.
Right.
And I
Yeah,
thought that
and
would
that
be kind of, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. It's
Oh,
I
just
want to hear from you.
well, I was just gonna say that they're not really afterthoughts as much as they're more like monster of the weeks. So like they're monster of the weeks, but also you're supposed to kind of empathize and sympathize with them as like they're just again they're all just trying to get by, and he's going off hunting these demons, and you're the idea is like they're classified as demons, but they're really just people, and they're just trying to like live, and they're not hurting anybody. Um, so yeah, so the hope is that you like the characters that he hunts because it makes his job more controversial and more kind of messy.
Right. Yeah. I appreciate that. I mean, with you mentioned Buffy, and that's another another series that um there was a sinisterness, right? There's always like, oh, this thing is hiding amongst us and it's killing or it's doing, whatever. But the more interesting idea is I think the one that you've kind of created where you have somebody tasked with hunting these things. Um, but they're not really, you know, like what are they really doing? Like, they're really just trying to assimilate. And then
Yeah.
you have that's a much different conundrum. And your style really lends itself, and I don't know what it is about it, it, it to humor. I don't know how I'm terrible at. I love comics, and I should be better by now, having done this for a number of years. But I'm really terrible at describing like artistic styles, because it's not cartoony, but there's a certain like whimsy to what you do that it can be threatening when you have drawn monsters and characters. And I think you recently put something on, I think on Blue Sky or Twitter,
Mhm.
from Bliss, and it was like a very sinister looking woman with like I think a bone sticking out of her mouth.
Mhm.
I think that
That's actually
and
that's the cover for the next issue of Living Hell.
oh, is it? Is that what it's
Yeah.
from? Oh, okay. It just
I thought it
reminded
was
me of something
Geeky
from
Ninky.
Bliss.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I wasn't sure. But yeah, so you do these things that they can look very, sinister. Even the monster that we see, or the shepherd that we see in issue 1.
Mhm.
But yeah, your style also kind of does lend itself to, I don't know, maybe it's the expressiveness of your characters that uh, I just there's an easygoingness to your style that I find very enjoyable to read and to get into and to look at. So,
Well,
um,
thank you.
yeah,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
I think it helps with the humor in the story too.
mhm. I mean, I think part of it is just that a lot of my influence comes from outside of comics. So, like I love the animation world, and I considered for a little while getting into animation. And I've done some I mean, I've animated a lot for video games over the last since like 2008 I've been working in games. So I've done some 2D animation stuff, but I think that yeah, animated film has really been a big influence for me. Iron Giant and Don Bluth movies and Sylvain Chomet, who did like Triplets of Belleville and
Oh, okay.
yeah, all sorts of stuff. And with those characters, I love like I love for how in like the Iron Giant, like they're cartoony, but they're also grounded, and there can be really serious moments, but also really funny moments. And it's kind of this liminal state with these character designs that can kind of be really versatile and play both.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, that's interesting. Yeah. So when you go to approach something like this, um, and you're designing these types of characters, is there, because you're doing the writing and the art, um, is there, are you looking for influences or like in terms of creating these characters? I'm just kind of curious because I know before with a series like Bliss, there were characters that definitely looked very like, were nods to certain folks. Like, are
Mhm.
you doing that again in like Living Hell, or is it too tough to make somebody that might be recognizable a demon?
Right. Well, it's funny because Bliss, I know who you're talking about. The main character looks a lot like Lin-Manuel Miranda. I swear to God, it's not. It's so okay. The cast for Bliss, the people I drew in Bliss look like the people that modeled for me. They were friends of mine in Rochester, New York, that got together and literally acted out the series, and we took pictures of all the frames, and like I used their likenesses to like almost to the T, like slightly exaggerated, but I found people that I
Uh-huh.
thought looked. I found people like friends of mine that I thought had a really interesting look to them, and Matt was the guy that played the main character, and he does have a lot. He looks a lot like Lynn, um, but no, for this series, it was all just I just was online researching, celebrities and people that I thought had really interesting faces, and that's been a really good way for me to find reference, because if you're already a celebrity, then you probably have tons of pictures of your face at different angles, and it makes it easier for me to kind of figure out how I'm going to draw. And it's also like, I can make it loosely based on that person rather than, you don't want to get too close and then be like taking someone's likeness. So that's no good.
Yeah.
But
Oh, sure.
um,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Just a slight homage, maybe,
Yes.
or
Yeah. You like the shape of somebody's face or the way that their nose or their eyebrows or whatever it is, and you kind of just
yeah.
go from there. It's nice to have just something to base something off of and then kind of go from there. So,
Sure. So, uh, I guess I'm just so much more familiar with your artwork, but how long had you been writing? And is like writing your own series and doing both something you always wanted to do? And how did you find it with Living Hell? Like having to do both. Are you someone that scripted everything for yourself, or because you're doing both, you were just like, all right, I kind of have an idea what I want to do here. Like how do you? What's the practicalities of doing that?
yeah. Well, this was my first time writing a full series. And I've always wanted to try it. I've never like I didn't think of it as a real possibility until about a year ago, and I was thinking like, I think I could do this. I think I could at least try it. And so I started pitching stuff around, and I had a bunch of ideas. So I do think I mean, this kind of lit a fire for me. I think I want to keep writing. The first spark for me was getting to write a 10-page short story for Buffy the Vampire Slayer for Boom. It was originally, I thought I was just going to be drawing a 10-page story, and then they were like, "Okay, do you have any ideas?" And I was like, "What?" So they were like, "Yeah, you're writing it." And I was like, "Oh." So, but it was perfect because like I knew Buffy, the whole universe, like the back of my hand. So I gave them like 20 ideas. I was like, "How about this? Or how about that? Or how about this?" And they were like, "Well, we like all of these, but here's this one." Um, and I got to put all these little Easter eggs in for people who are hardcore fans about the lore. And it was such a blast. I was like, "Oh my God, this was the perfect introduction into writing for me," because it was like a universe that already existed that I knew really well. And it just got me excited. So I thought like, okay, now I had this in my back pocket as a possibility, something to like add to, my skill set if possible. And eventually I just thought, all right, screw it. I'm going to try it. So yeah, and I do write the whole thing out. I don't break down the panels as much as I write it. I break down the pages, but I don't break down panels when I'm writing the script. I kind of just write like a script. Um, and when I get to the art and I start doing the art, then I start thinking about how I'm going to do the panel breakdowns and how I'm going to lay it out. But while I'm writing it, it's just like a script, and there's barely anything else going on. There's no like specific stage direction as much as there's like, a little bit, but not a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious. I was curious about that. Well, I mean, I hope I can't wait to see the rest of the series, and I hope you keep doing it. In particular, I loved the family dynamic. I just think you captured, like I said before, something so relatable. Um, but even when um when your main character is talking to I can't the name I can't remember his first name. Jerome?
Jerome, yeah.
Jerome, yeah. And
Mhm.
when he's talking to his friend, like the little conversation like that they have beforehand, like sitting down talking at the bar, like
Mhm.
there's such a flow to the dialogue between your characters. And I mean, I really liked how the story is like structured. Like I love the setup. I love we just the outside of the bar. He's telling us about all the patrons. You instantly get a sense of this guy's personality, of Jerome's personality when he's going through like, here's the local, sex pest, and here's this person,
Mhm.
and then here's the health inspector. I wish I could help him out.
I
He's
know.
okay. Like just
He's
like
so miserable. Poor guy.
what it just it instantly, you hear living hell and you hear demons and he's this and that, but it instantly sets like the tone for what you're going to get here. You don't have somebody who is, the type of demon that's still trying to trick everybody and send folks back to hell and do all of these things. Like, and it really had that feel of like a bartender who's been there a while, even though I don't think he has been, like 2 months, and like knows the place. I just really thought that was great. And then, I mean, is the name of the place is I mean, is Horse Feathers like on purpose for I get the Marx Brothers, or
Yeah, it was a Marx
okay,
Brothers reference, but it was also kind of a nod to like Jerome being kind of a silly guy, and like I just thought it was a nice. It's also just like a great word, and I have like never seen that word. Like I never see that word anywhere, and I was just like, you know what, this is gonna be, yeah. And a lot of stuff is honestly like, nods to places I've lived or people I've known. So like, I mean, I'm sure that's what a lot of people do. This is my first time writing, so I was just like, just take from all of the places in your life and things that you experienced, because I'm scared. And yeah, so like Bedlam is very much based on upstate New York, Rochester, where I was for a really long time.
sure,
Even the outside of the bar is like the outside of a coffee shop that I went to a lot called Starry Night Cafe, and the waterfalls in the middle of the city, that's all based on Rochester. It's called High Falls. It's in the middle of downtown Rochester. And then like even like there's like graffiti in the tunnel before the shepherd gets to Jerome. That has like bands that I used to hang out with. Friends of mine who have like a parody rap group called Garden Fresh Rap.
oh, okay. Yeah,
And
I was wondering. I was because there's something on the left side that I'm like scrolling through to the page because I have it on my iPad. There was something on the left side
yeah,
that I
Old Lang
recognized,
Syne.
Old Lang Syne, and then I was like, I wonder what Garden Fresh is.
So yeah, Garden Fresh is a rap group by my two friends, Pete and Chris, and they have a song later on that actually makes it into the last issue. And then Old Lang Syne was a band that I played with for a long time in Rochester. That they were awesome. So I was just, again, it was all just like pulling from stuff I, yeah, I thought that
I
my friends would enjoy.
But I mean, the being able to do that stuff, I mean, I think is great. Like, leaving little Easter eggs and little nods, little things. And, you know, um, I love that stuff in a
Hmm.
comic. And, it's you're trying to tell a story, you're focusing on so many different things. But I love when a writer, artist is, letterer, whatever it might be, is going to take the time, to just put a little something, just to say that, if you take it all in, if you pay attention. I mean, I think even at the bar at Horse Feathers, you have things in terms of like either the names of the specials or the name of the drinks on like the back
I can't believe you
wall.
caught that. That's crazy.
No, no, the
You
bar
really
was
pay
Horse
attention.
Feathers. The bar
Yeah,
was Horse Feathers. I was paying attention to everything.
very impressive. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, I just like I said, I'm the I'm the perfect mark for this type of thing. This was just right up my alley. I mean, not just being a fan of your work artistically. I think the idea is great, and I
Oh,
can't
thank you.
wait to see where it goes. I just thought, yeah, I can't say enough good things about it. I just thought it was so good.
That's so nice to hear. It's really exciting to hear that, just because it's there's so much self-doubt, especially when you're doing your first book, and you're just like, oh my God. Like, it's not just like I described it at a panel um at Rose City as like, when you're an artist, you feel like you're in an orchestra, or you're in a band where you're kind of in the background. You can kind of fade out a little bit, like if you're just doing the art, and hide behind the writer a little bit. But like if you're doing both, it's like so terrifying, because whatever people say about it, it's like a criticism of you. You know what I mean? That's what it feels like. It's just like this takedown, or this like, this judgment for the whole world, and there's nobody else, so you're just kind of in the spotlight. And so I kind of get it now when writers talk about that feeling. It's like, oh yeah, okay, I understand. Yeah.
What do you think was the toughest challenge in terms of like putting the whole story together? So you pitch it, you get it, you got your concept, you got your characters, you're starting to build out the world, you got, you got a solid foundation, and then you start building everything out. Without giving anything away about future issues, was there anything that was kind of like tough to crack, or whether or not in the writing, the dialogue, story, or even, artistically, like?
Sure. Yeah, I think definitely there were a couple things. One was the pacing and trying to connect all of the subplots and secondary characters. And I realized, like, oh, I'm in the third or fourth issue and I haven't mentioned this character, and it, or this person's character trait, this like third tier character hasn't, like, their character trait didn't like come back to have like a point in the story, or to like, you know, uh, serve the plot. But then I'm like, you know what? Not everything has to serve the plot. Sometimes a character can just be quirky or have this thing happen, and you're like, okay, that was just like part of that world. It can just be by itself, and it can be entertaining in its own merit, or at least it can just contribute to that feeling of the world. So I think I kind of got over that. I was like, oh, not everything connects to everything, and then I was like, you know what? That's okay. Like, not everything has to be sewn up like in a perfect bow. Uh, and as long as you have the main plot work out, and you care about what happens to the characters, and the world feels believable, if I think that's okay. I mean, again, this is my first time, so who knows? But that's kind of where I'm at. Like, and so that was a little bit tricky. And then like the grandma, like I love the grandma, but she's like her hoarding, I thought would be integral in the story somehow. And it's not really, not to spoil, but that's just a little thing. But like, it's not really that important to the story, but it's just a part of her, and it kind of explains a little bit about her daughter. There's kind of just stuff in the family going on there. So I don't know. So stuff like that. And then I guess the other thing would be humor. Like, so like I said, like I grew up with a very jokey family. We have very Simpsons-esque kind of humor. We're always kind of like, giving each other a hard time, and it's like very sarcastic and sometimes dark and kind of like insult comic-y. And like so I wanted to bring that in, but also that is so hard to translate into a comic book, and also to reach a lot of different kinds of people, and also be funny to those different kinds of people. Like, so I kind of like, I bring in a lot of jokes and a lot of like, characters ribbing each other, but I'm also like, you know what? I'm gonna hide behind this. He's a dad, so he's making dad jokes, and it doesn't really jive with people. He's a dad. He's making dad jokes, whatever. So that's my big excuse for him. They kid around a lot, and I hope that it comes off, if not funny, then at least sweet. But that's been a really tough one, because you can't make references to too many things because of copyright issues. You can't make pop culture references. Like, it's a tricky place to walk, for sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, humor is tough, to
Period.
begin with,
Yeah.
to write. Yeah, and to do it in a comic, it just depends. Like, you certain sight gags maybe you can get away with visually, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, so many times, like when you look at what's been popular in terms of comedy, let's say the past decade or the past 20 years, references like a big, a big part of it, because we know certain things and we can reference a certain character or make fun of somebody because they remind us of like somebody else. You can't really do any of that. And also, when you're talking about your family and that, getting almost insult comic-y, like, yeah, that's like my family as well. I totally get that. The problem is sometimes if you've ever had like a sibling's friend come over who
Yep.
have not experienced that, they walk away and they're like, your family's they're kind of a bunch of jerks. And
Yeah,
you're like,
they're
oh
really
no,
mean.
that's right. Because if you don't have that context,
Yeah.
it can be tough. So if you don't, when you're writing something like that, if you're going to do that, I would think that you would have to kind of like build those relationships at the same time you're kind of playing the humor of it. I will say, though, as
Yeah.
a dad to 2 kids myself, you do get away with a lot with dad humor. So, if that's what you got to go with, that's fine. I thought it was great. I mean, the first issue, I can't wait to read the rest, but I thought instantly I got what a good relationship he has with his kid. And, I mean, it also helped that he reminded me a little bit of me, where I think he seemed like the type that relies a little too much. And maybe that's because he was a trickster god, unlike me. For purposes of the podcast, I have to say that. A little too much on humor to the point where like his wife, who's already dealing with a bunch of things, is just exasperated with him. And you were able to convey all of that in, 20, well, like 20 some pages, I thought it struck the right balance. So
Awesome.
I
Well, thank you.
understand how difficult that is. Like, that's, totally relatable in terms of trying to do all that. But
Sure.
issue 1, though, 10 out of 10. So
Geez. Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think it visually helps when it comes to like the insult comic stuff with the family, that they're still smiling, as like they're joking with each other and they're like ribbing each other, but they're also like laughing. So it's you can tell that they're okay with it, and it's just like the way they communicate.
Yeah. So I guess not to again, don't want to spoil anything, but is there any kind of like anything you're excited about, anything you can kind of tease for what your the upcoming issues?
Yeah, I mean, get ready for some crazy demons, and he's gonna have a few more coming up, and they're all really unique. And I think that you'll have a few more scenes with like with Jerome and his daughter like having fun, and you'll also have some darkness and a little bit of peeks into hell and hell's whole deal, and the guy that's kind of the intermediary between hell and earth. And that will be developed a little bit. So yeah, I think there's plenty to dig into. Joe and her friend Toby, you'll get to meet them and have fun with them together, because they're like best friends, and they both have dads who are demons. And not a spoiler really, because it's from issue 1, but yeah. So yeah, there's lots more is about to happen. It's just the beginning. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I like the intermediary guy. I'm assuming that's Quaid, who shows up in issue 1. But man, just what a weird little guy he is.
So, his character design, his face was very loosely based on the guy who plays Igor in Young Frankenstein. You know who I'm talking about?
Marty Feldman.
Yes, Marty Feldman. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Maybe it was his glasses and the suit, but he gave me a little bit of Burgess Meredith in Time Enough at Last, that Twilight Zone episode.
Oh, is that the one where it's the end of the world and his glasses break?
He just wants to read and then his glasses break. Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen the 60-year-old TV show. But Burgess Meredith, Burgess Meredith of Penguin from the Adam West Batman and Rocky fame. Yeah, he gave me a little bit of a, Burgess Meredith collecting all the books before his glasses break. But
I think
that's
funny.
Fair. Oh yeah, Marty Feldman. Yeah, big Young Frankenstein fan, and I mean, Marty Feldman was somebody that Mel Brooks worked with. gosh, I think he was also in Silent Movie, which has
Oh,
to be a Mel Brooks film that not many people have. I feel like not many
I haven't
people
seen that
my
one.
age have even seen. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's
Huh.
called Silent Movie that Marty shows up in as well. But well, that's great. That's fantastic. And you're still, while you're doing this and have been doing this, you're still, been doing a lot of cover work.
hmm
Um, I keep seeing, your name pop up on covers and variant covers. Do you find it difficult to balance that with writing writing your own series and doing the art for it?
Yeah, I mean the working on interiors is so much more arduous to me that I feel like a cover is like a break.
Oh,
Like
okay.
a cover, because I went to school for illustration, so illustration is much more. Or I went to school for fine art and illustration, and so it's kind of like a. I love being able to kind of have a finished drawing. I know if that makes any sense. Like it's been a weird transition trying to get into comics and like realize like, okay, these are panels and you don't have to have like finished illustrations for each panel. It's not supposed to be super detailed and super rendered and super this. It's supposed to be, you're supposed to read what's happening, right? So it's
Right.
you just leave what's necessary. And so it's nice, to take a break and go back into like what I'm more familiar with like just doing a full illustration and spending a lot of time on one image and kind of getting it where I want it to be. So it's fun. I love getting cover work.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm a huge fan. I am so I mean I was delighted when I saw that you were going to be, in Baltimore 2 years ago, and got to meet you and pick up that print. And this has been fantastic that you've, come on the podcast. I cannot wait for the rest of Living Hell. It was just delighted reading issue 1. And I mean, I love comics, and listeners are probably sick of me because I love a lot of stuff, and I try to, I'm always appreciative when folks come on, and I do like a lot of different things, but
Well, I
I
appreciate how much
I just
effort you put into like reading this and like reading into all the details and Easter eggs and like, man, it just makes, and honestly, it's like it made my day just to like know that there are people who are like really excited about all the little things that I thought people would miss, but it's really nice to hear all that. So thank you.
yeah, I really loved it. I mean, 100%. I really really did. I cannot wait. I think issue 2 is out January 8th.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a schedule mix up on my end, so it's skipped a month. So it should have been out this
Okay.
month, but it's coming out January 8th, and then every month after that. So there's only 4 issues, but yeah.
Awesome. Well, listeners, if you've heard me talk all about Living Hell, and you know the kind of things I like if you listen to the podcast, because I tell you like all the time. But yeah, this is something, and my brother and I watched like every episode of Supernatural. I'll give a shout out to my brother Bobby, the Cryptic Creator Corner's #1 most dedicated fan. Bobby, goes to Baltimore with me every year, and he listens to all my episodes of the podcast, and I think he'd really love it too. So we'll have to talk about it when he listens to this episode, and I'll make sure I put the issues aside for him too at the comic book shop, because sometimes he doesn't get to listen to them right when they come out, and then it's like
hmm
a week or two later. Did you order
Right.
this for me? And I'm like, yes, I knew you'd want it. I ordered it for you. Don't worry. That's my job.
You've got his
Um,
back.
yeah, I got him. But Caitlin, this has been phenomenal. I just really appreciate coming on. Loved Living Hell, and I really hope that this is not your first and only creator-owned
Oh,
series where you're doing the writing and
hell
the artwork.
no. Hell no. This is just the start, man. I cannot wait to get into it. I cannot wait to write more stories. This has been so awesome. And I honestly, you pumped me up because I'm working on the last 2 pages of the whole series right now. And I've been
Ah,
like in a slog. And so this has been such a pick me up and I really appreciate it.
well, I know I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on. Anytime, please. Maybe when the whole series is done, you can come back on and we'll do like a go through, like a spoiler intense breakdown before the trade or
Absolutely.
something. I
I
would
would
love
love
it.
that. Yes.
All right. Well, listeners, please, if you pick up Living Hell, let me know what you think about it. You can find me on Blue Sky or TikTok until it's banned. But
Womp womp. I am honestly really bummed about that.
my wife is too. But yeah, I thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you, and I will see you next time. Good
Thanks
night.
so much, Jimmy.